Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz, to a realistic map of meaning, where we've been reading one of his wonderful books, and it's getting better. Every chapter seems to get more and more, pulling it all together. So I'm looking forward to tonight. I believe we're on chapter 10. So let's just tune right in and see how the rabbi's doing. Shalom, Rabbi Shlomo. You're live on the air. We're going to turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dan. I hope everybody remembered. Nobody signed on yet, so I hope people remembered that change the clock. I made a mistake today. I sent out a few hours ago. I meant to send out the Zoom invitation with the link and so on. Here's Rabbi Jones, okay? And I forgot to. I sent it to myself, but I forgot to back copy it to the blank copy it to everybody else. So I did it just a few minutes ago. So you should get it, if not already, at least soon. And here's Rabbi. I think Ronald Dickman said he would join us too. I gotta keep my eyes open to admit him. But meanwhile, I'm going to go to, I think we're up to chapter 10. We finished chapter 9, and as I said in the email that I sent out last time, I don't like to give away. I said, do you remember what made Moshe special? Dan, should I put you on the spot?
You hit on several unique points that made Moshe greatest prophet, none like him before or ever will be again. I really appreciated you citing all the source materials for that in Torah Tanakh right there in the book. That was very valuable material. I actually made in my notes, chapter 9 is on my review list for sure.
Okay, so I pointed out that Moshe was the humblest of all men, and God even attested to that. So that was the key to facilitate what made it, how he was became the honest broker between us and God, because he didn't allow himself to intrude on what God was saying. Rabbi, you raised your hand. Was there a chat something or other? What do I do here?
I was gonna scream out humble.
Very good. Okay, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
You're right on. Okay. So having said that, we're going to discuss how Moshe's message became the eternal lesson plan for us. So I'm going to read here the Torah lesson plan. In the previous chapter, I explained how Moshe was able to raise his vision by lowering his eyes. Through self-negation, Moshe understood God's reality in the clearest way possible for a human being. No one would ever surpass or even equal him, because it was a special gift granted by God. Good for him. What about us? We learn best from people who want to teach. Moshe's humility would guarantee that he not keep his clarity to himself, but want to share it. Clarity is hard to teach. When you have to, or just want to, how do you transmit clarity? How can you describe your vision or your experience to someone else who hasn't had it or even seen it? It requires an abundance of words and some simulations. I know this difficulty from trying to teach my young children when they were young. Do not step off the sidewalk, I would warn, so you don't get hit by a car. And if they disobeyed, I would spank their backside and respond to their outcry with, a car would hurt even more because it goes faster and sharper than my hand. Anybody out there, please defer any debate about my crimes of child abuse to another time and forum. That lesson was much easier to deliver than longer-term concerns such as brush your teeth so you don't get cavities, or study for your exams so you'll get a good job, or don't snack too much so you don't get fat. It's much harder to picture or simulate long-term concerns, especially when these concerns are so much more sophisticated and numerous than the examples given above. It takes a lot of time and a lot of examples. Throughout history, God provided many prophets to guide humanity. We know that God spoke to Adam, Noah, Shem, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Aaron, and Bilam. We know this from Moshe's written testimony in the Torah, not from anything they wrote. God hadn't asked any of these previous prophets to publish, because in the early generations, the creativity that God wanted from humanity had to be much more open-ended. Had one prophet carved his vision in stone, so to speak, it might have been very difficult for another to create an improved relationship with God. As it was, mistakes were made, and official documentation would have perpetuated such mistakes. Indeed, it was probably the lack of documentation that allowed Moshe to question past performance, identify errors, and develop his deeper clarity. God becomes a publisher. Even though Moshe had 40 years in the wilderness to teach his lessons, the people would never attain his clarity, and their descendants would certainly not, especially since Moshe's clarity about God consisted of the immense database that constitutes reality. Consequently, God finally said, "Write this song down for yourselves." That's in Deuteronomy 31:19. This instruction refers not only to the song that follows shortly in the text, but also to all the 5 books that Moshe wrote. Moshe's words are called a song because they are like the words of a song or poem that uses stylistic tricks to convey much more than the surface meaning. It is as if God said, "Your words will be the condensation of all the exactness about God, or as nearly exact as humanly possible, that you have experienced and taught. They will be an anchor to that truth for all future generations." Since Moshe had the clearest vision possible, he became the first prophet whom God told to publish his prophecy. His words serve as the proof text for all future prophetic writings. Do they concur with the original and best vision? God's imprimatur on Moshe's publication compels us to revere Moshe's 5 books above all others. They are as words dictated by God. We don't know whether God created letters in the air for Moshe to see, or a voice for Moshe to hear, or a mental conviction within Moshe that he could only convey in certain words. However it happened, the communication was unmistakably from God, and the words themselves were divine, each word ripe with meaning. Not so for the other prophets. After Moshe, other prophets were instructed by God to publish their visions. Their books complete the 24 books of the Torah. The visions of other prophets were clear to them, otherwise God wouldn't have entrusted them to deliver a message. But the words they wrote to describe their visions were their own words, not God's. The visions of other prophets were filtered through the lens of their own personality. They never reached Moshe's level of self-negation. That is why none of their books have the same level of authority or sanctity as Moshe's 5 books. Superior quality of Moshe's words. You know, it's amazing that no other prophet, Jewish or otherwise, ever claimed to record, as Moshe did, the exact words God spoke. The Gospels are personal accounts. Muhammad claimed dictation from the angel Gabriel, not Allah. The true prophets never claimed it because it wasn't true, of course. But why didn't the false prophets document, "These are the words God spoke to me"? Take your pick from false prophets who have convinced many that they have received a message or instruction from God. Since they have been able to promote a lie about themselves, why didn't they give themselves the maximum authority and put in writing, "These are the words"? Why didn't they set their bar as high as Moshe's? You don't have to ask this about the ones who were never convincing. They may have made the claim, but were never a threat. The only plausible answer is that God never allowed such aspirations to reach fruition. As discussed earlier, we can create ideas independent of God, in the sense of subconscious to God, but whether we ever get to act out the idea is subject to God's editing control. The superior quality of Moshe's words deserves to be burned into our minds. They are not more true than the words of other prophets. All real prophets spoke the truth. Rather, Moshe's words are more pregnant with the truth. They broadcast truth through every facet of their makeup, their pronunciation, their meaning, their order, and their selection or omission. A Jewish teaching declares there are 70 facets to the Torah. That sounds like a praise of its value, sparkles like a diamond. But it could also be matched with another Jewish teaching. There are 70 nations in the world. The curious commonality of 70 teaches there are 70 valid cultures, and the wisdom of the Torah is relevant for each. Only God's exact words could encompass all that. What about the Ten Commandments? Speaking of diamonds, this is a good place to compare Moshe's 5 books, written on parchment, with the Ten Commandments carved in stone. Why the different mediums, parchment and stone? Probably because they have different intended functions. The original tablets of the law were never a public spectacle, just the opposite. They were preserved inside the Ark. That was the subject of the famous movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Ark itself was preserved in the innermost chamber of the temple, the Holy of Holies, so called because it was visited only once a year and only by the holiest person, the high priest, on the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur. In other words, a very private affair. It never became fashionable for Jews to make ornamental copies of the Ten Commandment tablets, so no archaeological evidence has been dug up, and the originals were long ago lost to war or secret storage. The only way we know what was written on them is from what is written in Moshe's 5 books, Exodus 22 to 17 and Deuteronomy 5, 6 to 17. On the other hand, there were always many copies of Moshe's books, because every adult male had a duty to write a copy for himself, and they did. Think of the Sinai event as a wedding between God and the Jewish people. Each of the 10 commandments was a divine expression of love, of the sort, because you have done this, or you will do that, the instructions, I thee wed. In that sense, the tablets were like the wedding photos we take today to preserve the beauty, the joy, and the grace of the moment. The wedding album is open maybe once a year to revisit the original passion of commitment. So too the tablets, preserved in stone, those proclamations uttered by God in that one-time moment of intimacy at Sinai, they too are revisited by a high priest in the Holy of Holies on the holiest, read most intimate day of the year, Yom Kippur. In contrast, the words on parchment, the Torah text, are like the shared recipes for the family's favorite meals. They're consulted regularly. Text needs an informed teacher. Just like a recipe can have variations, text can always be read in different ways and with different emphases. Ancient texts are especially vulnerable to this ambiguity since they come with no punctuation at all. God overcame this obvious fault line by having Moshe orally explain his text on many levels, like a poem, over the 40 years of wilderness. The lack of punctuation thus embellished the text with added layers for different parsings. There's an ancient teaching that God composed the Torah before creating the universe, and it was this composition that was later revealed to Moshe. I understand this to mean that the Torah records the concepts that drove the construction of the universe, like a blueprint. For example, a blueprint indicating a closet will cause the builder to enclose a space on 3 sides with a door in front, install a clothes bar across the length of the space, and finish the interior floors and walls less expensively than the surrounding space. Similarly, since the Torah guides us to place fringes on a 4-cornered garment, God therefore included on our planet the need for clothes, the ability to weave clothes from fibers, the simple geometry of a 4-cornered garment object, and so on. All this to enable us to fulfill the instruction to put fringes on a 4-cornered garment. Labeling Torah as a blueprint of the universe puts it side by side with modern methods of description. We use numeric equations to quantify the universe's physical forces, and we use geometric coordinates to plot the universe's spatial dimensions. Words are symbols the same way digital code is. In this vein, we should realize that God used the words of the Torah to codify another aspect of the universe, namely the creative and destructive elements of human behavior. Do not think I invented the idea of Torah codes as a cute trick to satisfy modern sophistication. Already thousands of years ago, Jewish sages were referencing codes found within the text of the Torah. One of these codes relies on using the numerical value of the letters, for example, starting the Torah with the number 2, as described earlier. Another code relies on forming a new word by substituting some or all its letters with a coded counterpart. One famous substitution method is called atbash, because it replaces the first letter in the alphabet, A, with the last Hebrew letter T, hence the at, and the second letter, B, with the second last Hebrew letter, Sh, hence the bash, and so on, and then interprets the result. The underlying premise of this code is that a mirror image can shed light on the original. The Bible code. Other ancient sages found hidden messages in Moshe's books by reading every Xth letter, where X could be 5 or 17 or 231 or whatever. As can be expected, such codes were never easy to find in the past. Today, though, computers can easily skip a set number of letters and read the results. The results of such computer searches came to be known as the Bible code method. Quite a few clusters of historical events were uncovered by computer that way, and since the Torah seemed to predict these events by clustering them, some claimed this was proof of the Torah's divine origin. Others claimed, and I'll give you an example. I didn't give an example here because I didn't really want to belabor it, but as I mentioned later, I used to teach these codes, and I guess the most famous example was that they found all kinds of references to World War II in close proximity to each other in the Torah, so much so that when you circle the letters that make up the words, they cross each other in that part. Quite a few of that. Others claimed they could use a computer to find similar predictions in any large text, such as War and Peace. Look up Bible code in Wikipedia for a detailed recounting of this feud. The critics correctly argued that if you just keep searching until you find related words, eventually you'll find something related. The trick is to predict the relationship beforehand. The nub of the controversy hinged on how objectively each side had selected the predictions before the search began. Some diehards still fight this battle, but the divine origin side disbanded some time ago to avoid being associated with charlatan claims. One famous charlatan claim came from Michael Drosnin, who wrote the bestseller The Bible Code, Touchstone 1997, predicated on using this method to predict the future. Of course, he couldn't prove it, but the claim was bold enough to earn him fame and fortune. I taught the Bible codes for a while before the controversy hit and remain convinced they are real. However, not the way Drosnin pretended, and maybe not even the way the divine origin side claimed. If the Torah was written by unlimited God, as it were, we could expect every message in the Torah to be real, no matter from which angle it was found, whether that be by skipping letters, transposing letters, reading the numerical equivalents, or a host of other possible codes. Be aware, though, that there will be Torah codes for all possible future events, most of which will never happen. This contention is based on the way I earlier reconciled our free choice with God's knowledge of the future. God just knows all the futures. Consequently, even though all possible future moves are coded into the Torah, no one can predict the future by skipping letters, because other futures are equally possible, but would only pop out from a different code, such as the aforementioned Atbash. Who can know which code to use? Perhaps not even God. because God is waiting to see our free choice, and only then will activate the appropriate future outcome. There's an old code. Don't think I'm the first to suggest that God waits to see our free choice before activating any one of several possible futures. The idea has already been used long ago to solve a riddle. Why, the scholars ask, were the Egyptians punished for enslaving the Jews when God had already predicted it to forefather Abraham? Know that for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. Genesis 15:13. If it was predicted, why were the Egyptians punished? Two answers are offered. First, God never dictated that it had to be the Egyptians. Doesn't mention Egyptians here. Didn't have to be the Egyptians who would do this. It could have been another nation, but it was the Egyptians who chose to do the crime. Second, even if the Egyptians had to do it, they did it more viciously than necessary, and for that, they were criminally responsible. In either case, different futures were always possible, and the final outcome hinged on behavioral choices. Moshe's Torah is a lesson plan for teaching proper behavior to future generations. Every facet of Torah addresses behavior because we can control our behavior more easily than our minds, and our behavior affects our minds, and our minds is a tool with which we create like God. We should expect no less from a well-crafted lesson plan. That's the end of chapter 10. A lot of codes.
Yeah, interesting material. I remember when they came out back in the 90s there, and I didn't put much stock in them, but there was definitely a lot of hullabaloo mentioned about it, and I can see why the author of that book you mentioned there, went for it full bore. I mean,
Yeah. Michael, he made money out of it. But I met the people that actually wrote the code that found these things, and who delivered constructed the original lectures. I went out lecturing about it a few times. Just they told me, the information to present, um, but it was a question of trusting them that they had honestly said, "Well, look, if there's coded messages in Torah, then these two items should be found close together." Somehow code. So they had 30 or 40 pairs of that should have appeared, and so then they ran the computer code, and they found that using statistical probability analysis, they found that there was very significant that they were close enough to have been put there on purpose. It wasn't an accident. So that was the beginning of it. But the ones
Rabbi, can I ask? I mean, what do you know about the Kohen Gadol's breastplate with the stones, that the ephod that had the stones? From what I've heard, there was a communicating glint on the stones when the high priest went into the holy of holies once a year, and there was a decipherable message through a glinting on the ephod.
We call it. We pronounce it ephod. That's the Hebrew. The Hebrew is ephod, and you got the letters right. ephod. But in the Hebrew letters, you can see it's pronounced ephod or ephod, and like ale, which is the same letter. It's the aleph at the beginning. But I don't recall any particular message being glinted on Yom Kippur. I do recall that it was available for interrogation. So if they had a question that they weren't sure of, they could go and ask a question. They had to ask a question to the ephod, and it had to be in the form of questions, and it would help them narrow it down. So it would light up to indicate this is right and that's wrong, something like that, and they would narrow it down. So there was they had prophets also, and so they could
Yeah,
go to the
yeah.
prophets and ask questions. So it was a question of not clear to me on what circumstances would dictate what kind of things they should ask. Um, the fact that it was rare, like just the one place and in a very prescribed manner, um, always meant to me that you got a brain, you got your information, work it out. But
Right.
in cases of dire necessity or extreme nervousness, maybe
Hashem provides. Yeah.
we'll give you an extra ability.
Robbie's got his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Robbie.
I heard that from the flickering fire of the menorah, God would speak to the people in the congregation. Did you hear that?
No, no. It would speak. It would speak. First of all, not a voice, but he would again. If anything, it would be an answer to a question, and and then somebody would have to deliver the answer. There was always a go-between. So to get a direct message from God, you have to have you have to have erased yourself already, because if you're as we said earlier in the chapter, when they had the vision of Sinai, they thought they were going to die. It's not a simple task to see and experience the living God. It's the source of life. It's like touching a live wire. It's an electricity circuit. It's full of power. Not an easy thing to withstand. That's why there's such a distance between us and God. The only thing that makes you human is that because you're less aware of God's presence. Otherwise, you would have no choice. You wouldn't be able to choose anything. You would just do what's automatically got to be done. You see it so clearly. So you're the whole idea of your free choice is based on a distance from God. So you can't see the reality, and you have to work out yourself. You have to approach the reality on your own. That makes it yours. If it was just given to you, well, then there would be nothing to enjoy about what you accomplished, which we're going to get into in future chapters. I'll tell you a story though, along this line of the codes. There is a teaching. I'm not promoting this to anybody, but it is in the text. When I was a student in yeshiva one time, a friend of mine, who was a little brighter than me and a little more let's say connected than I, he and we were late teens or early 20s. He wanted to go to Israel and to study, and he had suggested that to our Rabbi, our teacher, and the teacher who we all adored said, no, it's an idea, but not now. And he no, I want to go now, and they were arguing back and forth. So he was so frustrated by the Rebbe's insistence that he wait, that he told me, this is a story he told me, that he went and he threw the Gros Geirl, which means he threw he he I would say Geirl is like a lottery. It's a device, and I'll explain how it works in a minute, to get an answer to a question. And it's from the Gros. The Gros is the Vilna Gaon. He lived in the 1700s. He was like a giant mind. He knew everything, and it was just a real guy. He left a note that you can do this. So what was it? You have to take a copy of the Torah that's printed the way it is written on the scrolls. So no chapter headings or things like that. Just the way it's written in the scroll. And you open it at random. Just open it up, and then you turn 7 leaves, and then you turn 7 pages, and then you go 7 paragraphs, and then 7 lines or verses and lines and words and letters, and start reading. You go 7, 7, 7, 7, and then you start reading. And he said, so he did that, and it seemed to him that the message was he should go to Israel. So he ran into the master of the Rebbe, and he said, "No, you see, I threw the gorel, and it came out I should go now." And the Rebbe was adamant. He says, "No, it didn't mean go now. It means, it's an idea, but not now." He says, "No, it came out now." So he says, "Throw it again in front of me." He ran and got the book, and he opened it up. He did it. He said, "This is the story he's telling me." He opened it up. and it came, and it was a clear message, clear, not now, later. So he had nothing he could say. The Rebbe was proven correct by that event. I later discovered the trick of this thing is, though, you have to really submit yourself to the idea that God will convey a message to you, but you have to be really ready to receive the message as it is. Don't read what you want, which is what he did. He read what he wanted into it. You have to have someone guide you on how to really read this. And so I later saw in another holy book that actually you could use any holy book to do this. You're entitled, if you're Jewish, has a holy book, and you're frustrated, this is only for, like, you can't get an answer, you can't satisfy yourself if you have an answer any other way. You go, rabbis and this and that, you just torn with doubt, and it happens every now and then. And if that's the occasion, if that's what happens, then you have a right to ask God for a sign for what to do. But you have to be ready to receive the sign, and you have to be ready to carry it out. And in that case, if you really are, God will send you the sign. That's basically what it's saying. And there's the methods to do it. And I've met people that had signs, and they felt that there was a sign there, and non-Jews, and they felt, and I'm willing to accept it. God guided them. Why not? God's guiding everybody. God's got his mind on everybody, and everything. And if it can happen that somebody really seeking God's direction, even if they don't have the same image of God I have, God's there, and God's interested in working with us. He's working anybody alive has got a role to play for God, because it's part of his story. So there you have it. That's the way I read it. So that's that chapter.
Excellent. Yeah.
And maybe I should put that story in there. I don't know. There was quite a bit to say about codes, and it's hard to live with.
You've got to have a definite flair for it or not, right? It's not everybody's
it's
bent, for sure.
Kind of a dangerous thing to put in. Story,
there's too many conspiracy theorists out there looking for threads to connect and tie and bind, and it's
right. Okay.
Certain things are left best clearly stated, for sure.
Yeah.
But,
well, that's why we have a written Torah and an oral Torah. Some things you can say aloud, but they're hard to write exactly. So
well, I'm interested to see where you're taking this book. Does that mean we're on for chapter 11 tomorrow, Rabbi?
Yep, we're on for chapter 11 tomorrow. It's already prepared to go. And any questions or comments can be done to sbs447@gmail.com. That's Sam Bob Sam 447, 3 letters, 3 numbers, at gmail.com. Have a good evening, and thanks for hosting that.
Excellent.
Good
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi. We'll see you same time tomorrow night. That's been our Zoom Daily, live with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz, to a realistic map of meaning. I look forward to hearing more of his book tomorrow night. So till then, we'll see you. Bye for now.
Rabbi, you bought a computer CAD and searched your name. Yeah, you'll find that was one of the things that the there's another story about him. How he felt everybody's name was encoded there, and they're together with something very significant about their life. I'll try to mention that next time we come back.
Yeah, like the double slit experiment. Yeah. Observation. Yeah, changes. But I don't think observation, I look at it like a river. Doesn't stop everything flowing, that's for sure. Anyways, okay, Rabbi, we'll chat.